All right. Simon Wong, law firm Stevenson Howard. Now, this is the private aviation panel, so nice to have you. So let me introduce our panelists. So, Melissa Bacani from Citi, besides me. And then Mathieu Wabila from HSBC. And then it is Wenli Huang from Credit Suisse. And then last but not least, David Dixon from Jetcraft. Now, as an aviation finance lawyer, working both on commercial aircraft and business jets, I have seen, well, I've been kept busy since COVID-19, but for different reasons, on both sides, but for different reasons. In commercial airline business, I see a lot of restructuring, bankruptcy protection, and what have you. On business jet side, well, I mean, I've been seeing new deals, haven't been doing repossession so far. And we have been hearing different stories as to how the market is doing. So I'm going to pose before I actually pose the question, I should actually set the house rule because I have the opportunity to speak with you. I'm going to make this a little bit more interactive, so I'm going to pose each of my questions to one or two of you, and then the rest of our panelists, please do jump in whenever you have got a point to add, okay? So for this question, first question, I'm going to pose it to David. You have long been in history, 14 years I heard, right? So, and Jetcraft is a very active, broker. So how do you see the impact of COVID doing on business jet aviation? Demand, values, type of services people want, etc.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I described last year as a year we'd all rather forget, but we'll all remember. Because in business aviation, and like just about any other aspect of life, I guess, it was pretty frozen. And we just didn't know which direction we were going. But the last quarter, and certainly the beginning of this year in business aviation, it's a significant uptick. In the US, it's up 40% in aircraft transactions, which is good and solid because that's the key market. If the US doesn't move, the rest of us don't move. Europe is doing quite well. Asia's at best stalled, maybe going backwards slightly. There are pockets of activity, but the reason the US is doing so well is it's an inherent business aviation user anyway. But there are people now who've always had the money who now see the need because they didn't, the airlines weren't bad, it was the connections were there. That's under question now. And they're now saying, do I want my wife? Do I want my family? Do I want those who work near me to be traveling on the commercial airliners or going through airports? And I think it's the airports that are the issue. People now want to avoid airports if they can, which is favoring the longer range airplanes. And that's particularly the case out in Asia where there is activity in the longer range, bigger airplanes. So it's a sort of mixed bag. Last year it was pretty depressing. This year I can have to say I'm working 7 days a week. In Asia, the situation is domestic Australia is very strong because, again, for 4 hours, you're still in Australia. In the States, for 6 hours, you're still in the States. For 6 minutes here, you're in 3 countries. Be careful what I say here, but Taiwan, Macau, Hong Kong. In 60 seconds in Singapore, you're in 3 countries, Singapore, Indonesia, all different rules, cruel regulations, quarantine restrictions. It's not inherent to business aviation, unfortunately. So it's a mixed bag, but I'm pleased to say I'm getting up in the morning with plenty to do.
Right. Wenli, you want to add to that?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the organizer for having me being here. Just add on to David's, what he just mentioned, from the bank side, we also see the demand, so much so that it's even just last year, we see customer that has been thinking 4 or 5 years to own a business jet. They couldn't make a decision. But pandemic triggers them to think of safety, traveling with, with their family, with their loved ones, to give them better protections. So aviation is it's quiet, but we do see activities coming from the pandemic. And certainly we see more inquiries in the first quarter this year in Asia.
Yeah, I'd like to add that for, just as Vani had said, we have clients who have inquired about buying aircraft. And one thing that we have noticed is the supply of certain models has really gone down. So it's, the 650 market, for example, there are very few models that are available in the secondhand market. And in fact, anecdotally, some clients, we've told some clients that if they do find an aircraft that they want to buy, they actually do need to make a decision pretty quickly. Otherwise, that aircraft is, going to go to somebody else. And another evidence of this demand is also, the PPI inspections. A lot of the facilities are booked up, and it's quite hard to get an appointment or a slot to do a PPI. So those are good indicators for the market.
All right. Do you see? Am I correct in saying that we do see more of a demand for chartering, David?
I think there's a broad, in the US particularly, charter is going very well. Fractional ownership. For the first time ever, NetJets went out and bought pre-owned airplanes. Normally they went to the OEMs, bought what they wanted, but they needed extra capacity very quickly, and the only way is to go to the pre-owned market, and they hoovered up, I think it was 8 Global 6000s very quickly. Of course, once that word was on the street, prices started to solidify, if that's the right word. So charter, fractionals, and it's across the board. It's even, I say even, but you've got the wheels up type of operation. You've got NetJets, you've got VistaJet on a worldwide basis. They are all very active.
Right. So NetJet, I heard that they tried to do it in our region some years ago. I don't know how successful that is. But we got different forms of ownership besides the fractional ownership proper, as in the US. We got, let's say, using SPV, etc. So, Wendy, you have something to add on that? I know you are quite interested in that on that topic as well. Yeah.
On the aviation side, we're still exploring on this, but I'm also covering super yachts, which is very similar to aviation. We see customers that are considering fractional ownership because they don't, especially this time, they probably don't have the usage as the normal average time. So we managed to secure cases on the fractional ownership financing.
Would you be happy to finance one? I mean, a fractionally owned aircraft?
If all the beneficial owners are very strong profiles, why not? If they all have good credits, I think the bank see less risk, and it would be a good business to do.
Right. Okay. Talking about the products that you guys offer, Mattia, how do you see yourself? Being a private banker, how do you see your products? Probably as compared to other banks, or probably compared to other, industry players such as Global Jet Capital, being a finance lessor. How do you position yourself and see your products?
Okay, so offering this from the private bank, I think the key differentiator would be that we look at each transaction very differently. So it's bespoke, basically. And we do something for a client. Of course, we're going to be looking at the asset and the residual value, but we probably spend a lot more time thinking about who is the owner, who is going to be the guarantor, is he the right client for us? So I would say that's the first main difference. And then from there, if he's the right client, we're definitely going to do something special. And maybe that means a slightly higher LTV, maybe that means PDP financing, or going into a jurisdiction that may be a little bit hairy. So that's, I guess, the key difference.
All right. Would it be fair to say that as a private banker, you'll be quite choosy as to your customer? You will be more choosy as to your customer, given that you are private bankers. You would defend. You would choose. You would choose.
Yes, absolutely. You know, aircraft is an expensive tool, so you know, it costs anywhere between 1 million to 4 million to operate every year. So you just work back from there in terms of the cash flows that you need to support that comfortably, and that kind of restrict the I would say the world or the universe of client
Okay,
that we
understood.
would be happy to
How
finance.
about you, Melissa?
Yeah, if a client wanted to finance a private jet these days, I think he has a lot of options. He's got, the bank option and he's got the non-bank option. And at the spectrum of the non-bank option, we've seen very aggressive LTVs all the way up to 100%. You've got longer tenors, you have lower amortization, you probably have covenant light or no covenants. And so one wonders, why would clients actually finance through a private bank? Besides the fact that banks can offer a lower cost of funding just because we have our deposit base. We've been asked this question multiple times. And the one reason is obviously the relationship, the strength of the relationship that we have with our clients and the trust that they have built with the institution. So it's that plus the fact that the banks can offer a one-stop solution. So we not only do aircraft financing for our clients, but we would probably have an extensive relationship with the client on other fronts, either in the corporate bank or on the investment bank on the market side. We can also add on other structures, financing structures like interest rate swaps or currency hedges. And of course, when our clients ask, why leverage against the aircraft? As you know, leverage is a financial strategy. So our clients typically don't actually need the financing, but they will make those assets work harder for them. And so they will reinvest those proceeds, for example, with Citi Private Bank, where we have a very good investment platform. And we could potentially, make that asset work harder for them by generating a yield on that investment.
Understood. Benny, you have anything to add to that?
Similar to what Melissa has mentioned, from what we saw last year, actually some of the customer in the past, they weren't consider putting their jet on financing, but now enjoying the low interest rate, it's probably 50% compared to 3-4 years ago. So they decided to refinance the aircraft and make use of the loan proceed to reinvestment in private banks or in other investment tools, which we saw Q4 or Q1 amongst all banks. Our performance has been really, really well. So it's the time that they cannot fly and they reinvest. So it's no brainer that they don't invest with the private bank.
All right. So while we are talking about what the banks can offer, so Matthieu, we as lawyers, we have been talking about and thinking a lot about NIBOR transition, and then we know that NIBOR is not going to be available, in due course. So what's your bank doing about it? People are suddenly scratching their head. NIBOR is gone, all our benchmark is gone. So what to do?
Okay, so first of all, there's something called cost of fund, which maybe not, all the partners and peers and players in this room are familiar with, but in the private banking world, this is actually a very common way to finance assets. And that's obviously not going to change. Now, as far as aircraft financing is concerned, very often we would use LIBOR. That's true. And so basically right now we offer, in addition to cost of fund, we offer the old benchmark with a switch option, obviously, or language in the docs. So to be able to move away from, say, US LIBOR to SOFR, whenever that's going to be available, or actually it's available now. Or if some people have a strong preference to start using the new benchmark, we can also do that right now. And probably later this year, we will be just offering the new benchmark versus cost of fund and stop using the old benchmark altogether.
Okay.
I think as soon as July or August.
All right, that's quite interesting. How about the other bankers? Anything to add to that?
Well, the good news is that LIBOR, I think, is only going to cease after 2023. So we still have time, but yes, definitely all the banks are, planning their transition and incorporating, switch language into their documents.
I see.
It will be a lengthy project for the bank, and for specialists, we started to inform the clients and the bankers that we're going through this change, which will take stages, let's say, in the next year, to amend all the loan agreements, work together with the clients on this project.
Understood. So let's switch to a slightly more interesting topic. Melissa, I know that you are very interested in the implication of technology on the industry or private aviation. So can you tell me a bit more about that?
I think this subject is more of an offshoot of an earlier topic that was covered, which was regarding charter, fractional ownership, and jet card. And I think that because of COVID, people have actually, moved towards trying out these types of schemes. Whereas previously they would have paid for a first-class ticket, now they are willing to pay for, a charter flight or becoming a member of a jet card, for example. And what's made this interesting is that it's sort of democratized private aviation, and it's made it a bit more accessible to more people. And one reason why that's actually happened is because the technology, the apps that are available are actually quite user-friendly. And so technology and the booking platforms that are available have made it easier for clients to actually see what jets are available, what destinations they can fly to, what the cost will be, and book it right away. So this what we call ride-sharing technology or the sharing economy that we see in other industries like Uber and Airbnb has actually reached the private aviation market. I mean, it's been there, but actually it's sort of been propelled much quicker because of what's been going on in terms of the restriction on the commercial flight side. And so technology definitely has had a big role to play in making private aviation more accessible to more people.
Okay. So David, do you see anything interesting on that front? Yeah. Do you have any observation regarding the implication of technology?
Well, I'm pretty old school, so technology's not my sharpest skill set, I have to say. But I tend to look at that infrastructure and the limitations that we're all constrained by. I like throwing out some nice numbers, but there are 5,000 active airports in the United States. There are only 250 in China. So you could just imagine the combinations of airports and city pairs. To Melissa's point about the people's access to airplanes, the airplanes are there and the airports are there. Even if China doubles the number of airports, it's got a way to go. I mean, there are more aircraft in California than the whole of Asia. So, I mean, we've got a way to go here. The limitations are infrastructure, airports, access to the airports. I'm hopeful that for us, the Greater Bay Area might generate some flexibility, whether it's access to Zhuhai, make it an international airport. It'll just be an hour's drive from here on a road and a bridge, which is all there. We just need the mindset of certain organizations around us to get it done. And then we can then start growing charter and business aviation to where I think it should be going in this region. We should be doing better.
Right. David, let me change my question a little bit. Do you see more concern from either your buyers or the manufacturers regarding emission and you see environmental issues?
About the what?
Environmental and emission.
Emission?
Yeah.
You only have to look out of the window and see whether Hong Kong worries about the environment. I just think the area, the world needs to wake up on the subject. It's not just here, it's everywhere. I think the OEMs are producing more and more efficient and better airplanes, longer range airplanes, less stops, that's all positive. And I think we'll see no real pressure, and if we do something about it. It's like anything, if we do nothing, stand still, people will criticize.
Melissa, Wendy or Melissa, whoever, take turn maybe.
I think that people are more conscious now about the way that they travel. So they're a bit more thoughtful about the trips that they take. So people are not flying on a whim anymore, also because it's logistically very difficult with all the quarantine requirements, etc. But I think that since people have become more conscious about their travel, they have also become more conscious about the emissions that travel generates. And so I think that it's good that we see more platforms that are available where people can actually offset their carbon emissions. And I think that's one good thing coming out of this, that people are just, some financiers are actually helping clients to calculate, for instance, the cost of their emissions so that they can help them offset it, and that there are platforms available that people can use to offset their emissions.
And it's very, very seriously. We are starting the project last year, moving forward on ship financing, on aircraft financing. How do we reduce emission? We're developing index to help our client to understand the emission that they usage. And going forward, we also encourage our client to use more advanced model, newer model aircraft, which is more fuel efficient. And of course, we will also give them incentive in order to do so. So this is our footprint going forward.
Right. Mathieu, you have something to add? Last time I visit your canteen, you have you see recycling dustbin in your canteen, right?
Well, look, I mean, this is definitely, like Vanny and Melissa, this is as a bank, this is a topic that we are focusing on. But in the context of, private jet financing, I'll be honest, this is not the first thing that my clients raised. It'd be more, my dad is a traditional Chinese gentleman and he doesn't want us to have it too easy. So that would be the kind of, obstacle to purchasing rather than this. I think, just to echo what David was saying, I think some of the big long-term drivers of growth will be more about, how do people see this asset, and shifting from just a luxury asset to a business asset or productivity tool. And for that to happen, infrastructure, liberalization of airspace, they will need to happen to be in the same position as somewhere like the US. So there is a big, big room to grow.
Right. Now, so we have 2 minutes, I was told. So a couple of years ago, I do have some, quite a number of repossession cases, and you see supervised sale of aircraft in a default scenario. I mean, Wendy, you want to share some experience with us?
Yes. A couple of years ago, we experienced difficult cases, repossessing aircraft, which the bank has to take in, a lot of commercial decision. Okay, first, we do not want our customer to default. We work with them. We have 20 years of experience working with customer. We work with them, try to help them out in order not to be default. And if that is the case, that the aircraft has to go into default, we have to involve aircraft manager like David, aircraft broker, to help us, because our technical knowledge is limited. So we work with David or other brokers to help us to find the right client. As well as manager, it is very important to have them to support us on the technical side, because aircraft repossession could take up to from 6 months to a year to 2 years, which aircraft could go out of maintenance, which will devaluate the aircraft, which we don't want. So we need a lot of expertise in terms of repossessing, like advice from lawyers and also
yes.
David.
So the natural question would be for David. How can you help them?
I think it sounds a bit rude to say maybe you should plan for repossession when you do the finance, in the sense that if the bills are not being paid, you're probably going to get an aircraft that's deficient in many different areas. So it's enforcement of the conditions of your loan management, etc. We get this quite a lot where an aircraft, by the time it comes to me, when a financial institution says, can you please sell this, very often, and it's going to be well down below where the bank wants it to be, and there's only tears because there's maintenance outstanding, there's bills unpaid, management, and everyone's lost interest in the aeroplane, and then it's a continual spiral down. So I always try and encourage people to sort of enforce the maintenance of the aeroplane. The OEMs, for example, here, if an aircraft sits in this environment, and by that I mean anything from Beijing to Singapore, in the humidity and in the salt environment by the airports, it just deteriorates rapidly. And if it's not properly cleaned, it sounds stupid, but I can tell you in the last, and there's someone sitting out amongst you here who knows the bills of one particular aircraft, several $1 million to put it back in the sky because it just wasn't looked after. And it's not insurance, and it's probably going to come from the bank when you have to fix it. So my message to the industry, whether you write the finance document or you manage the aeroplane, we have to enforce it, because when you repossess, that's when the real bills start.
All right. So the instruction given to me by the organizer is that I will let you have the final short question. So my question for each of you as a wrap-up is, when will you see we going back to the level as pre-COVID? How about starting with you? The level business back to pre-COVID in terms of the private aviation sector.
I think it's going very close to pre-COVID levels already. Just considering the state of the secondary market, and I'm talking mainly about the US market, because that's the market that we watch very closely. That's the biggest market for us. So I think we're getting very close to those levels, and it's good for the private jet sector in that sense. But,
Okay.
you know, as David mentioned, you know, Asia's still, you know, it's still waking up, and it's moving. We've seen, I think the statistics for 2020 was that China, which is the biggest jet market, you know, had an inflow of an addition of jets versus the previous year where it had an outflow. So hopefully this year there will be an addition of jets. I don't know, David, if you're seeing that.
I think you said it very well. I don't think I can add very much to that. It is busy in the US. I remain ever hopeful that Asia will come back strong again, but I think we're trapped at the moment. I wish I knew. I could just throw a personal point in on this. I haven't been in one country this long since the 26th of September, 1972. So you can see how bored I was once, because I worked it out.
All right. Mathieu?
Yeah, I mean, based on the first quarter figures of some of our partner manufacturers, I would kind of echo what Melissa is saying. It's rebounding very strongly, for some better than others. And, you know, I think, as everybody knows, it's going to take a bit of time for the situation to normalize with the vaccine and all this. So, you know, it's difficult to predict this. I'll just say, you know, for me, more than, you know, is it going to be 6 months or 1 year? I think we're in for the very long term, in Asia at least, for this industry. And, you know, we're focusing on the key drivers of very massive growth. You know, when do we really see this market growing? And there is a lot of potential, and I think this is going to be, you know, in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and that's really what's exciting me.
Okay, last but not least, Wendy.
I think it's still too early to say when we're going back to pre-COVID. I think U.S. market is definitely looking very strong, Europe as well, and hopefully soon Asia will pick up. But we see the number of billionaires that grow in China just last year itself is over 280. So that, I think that is a very promising indicator of the wealth is growing in APAC. The market will come follow.
All right. So that concludes our section. Thank you very much, our panelists. Thank you.